Most people pray to a God somewhere out there, begging for help, asking for things to change. Joel Goldsmith discovered something that shattered this entire concept. He found that God is not a being who responds to our pleas. God is a presence, right here, right now, closer than your breath. This isn't poetry. This is the core principle that transformed thousands of lives. When you truly grasp what the presence of God means, everything shifts. You stop seeking. You stop begging. You stop waiting for divine intervention from above. Instead, you begin recognizing what has always been present. This recognition alone begins dissolving problems without effort, without struggle, without the exhausting cycle of asking and hoping. The moment you understand presence, you realize God never left you. God never punished you. God never withheld anything. The infinite intelligence, the healing power, the abundance, the peace, all of it has been right where you are, waiting not for your prayers, but for your recognition. This is where true spiritual transformation begins. Joel Goldsmith spent decades teaching one revolutionary truth that most spiritual seekers miss entirely. The presence of God is not something you attract, earn, or deserve. It simply is. Like the sun shining, whether you acknowledge it or not. Your awareness of it changes everything, but your lack of awareness doesn't diminish it one bit. Think about this carefully. Right now, in this very moment, divine presence surrounds you completely. It's not watching you from heaven. It's not judging your worthiness. It's functioning as the very life force flowing through your body, the intelligence organizing every cell, the consciousness aware of these words. You are living, moving, breathing in God right now. Most religious teaching conditioned you to believe God is separate, distant, requiring rituals or intermediaries to reach. Goldsmith shattered this illusion. He revealed that separation from God is impossible because God is the very presence of existence itself. You cannot be outside of it. You can only be unaware of it. And that unawareness is what creates every problem you face. Here is the technique Joel Goldsmith practiced daily, the one that changed everything for him and his students. He called it recognition, not petition, not affirmation, not visualization. Simply recognizing what already is. You pause, you breathe, and you acknowledge silently that the presence of God is right here, functioning as your very consciousness. You don't say this hoping it becomes true. You recognize it as already true, whether you feel it or not. You might say inwardly something like this: the presence is here. Infinite intelligence is operating right now. Divine life is flowing through me this moment. Not as a prayer requesting help, but as recognition of reality. This is not asking God to show up. This is acknowledging God never left. What happens next unfolds gradually over days and weeks. At first, it feels like nothing. Your mind resists. Doubt creeps in. But if you persist in this recognition practice daily, something begins shifting in your consciousness. Problems that seemed insurmountable start dissolving. Solutions appear without force. A peace you cannot explain begins settling in your chest. The power of recognizing presence works because you stop empowering the illusion of separation. Every time you beg God for help, you unconsciously affirm that God is absent, that you lack something, that divine power is somewhere else. Recognition reverses this completely. It affirms the truth that changes your entire experience of reality. Joel taught that most suffering comes from one fundamental mistake, thinking that God is not present right now, exactly where you are, exactly as you are. When you live from this false belief, you create a consciousness of lack, fear, and limitation. Your experience then mirrors this consciousness. Not because God punishes you, but because consciousness manifests as form. The presence of God is not emotional. You might not feel warmth or peace immediately. That is perfectly normal and expected. What matters is the inner knowing, the recognition that despite appearances, despite problems, despite fear, the infinite presence is here. This knowing, maintained consistently, becomes the foundation that rebuilds your entire life experience from the inside out. Sarah came to one of Joel Goldsmith's classes completely broken. Her husband had left, her health was failing, and financial disaster loomed. She had prayed desperately for months with no relief. Joel told her something that initially made her angry. He said her prayers were the problem, not the solution, because they reinforced the belief that God was absent from her circumstances. He taught her to stop asking and start recognizing. Every morning, before fear could dominate her thoughts, she would pause and silently acknowledge that the presence of God was right there in her small apartment, in her aching body, in her empty bank account. Not that God would fix these things, but that God as presence was already there, regardless of conditions. The first 2 weeks felt futile. Nothing changed externally, but something subtle was shifting inside. The panic attacks became less frequent. A strange calm started appearing in moments of crisis. Then, in the 3rd week, an unexpected job offer came. Her health symptoms began improving without medication. Within 3 months, her entire life had reorganized itself, not through struggle, but through recognition. Marcus was a successful businessman who had everything except peace. Anxiety plagued him constantly. He tried therapy, meditation apps, and positive thinking, but nothing worked long-term. When he discovered Joel Goldsmith's teaching on presence, he was skeptical but desperate enough to try anything. Joel's approach was different from everything Marcus had attempted. Instead of trying to create peace or attract it or affirm it into existence, he simply recognized that peace, as an aspect of divine presence, was already present. He would stop multiple times daily and acknowledge inwardly that the peace of God was functioning right where he stood, in his office, in traffic, in difficult meetings. Progress came slowly. The first month brought occasional moments of unexpected calm. By the second month, Marcus noticed he could access this recognition even during stressful situations. 6 months later, his baseline consciousness had completely shifted. The anxiety hadn't been fought or overcome. It had simply dissolved in the light of recognizing what was already present beneath it. Jennifer's daughter was diagnosed with a serious illness. Doctors offered limited hope. Jennifer prayed desperately, made bargains with God, and exhausted herself trying to be worthy of a miracle. A friend introduced her to Joel Goldsmith's recordings, and one sentence stopped her cold. God is already fully present, and your recognition of this presence is what allows healing to manifest. She began a practice that felt counterintuitive during such crisis. Instead of begging for healing, she recognized that divine life, the presence of God, was already flowing through her daughter's body, organizing every cell with infinite intelligence. Not that it would heal her, but that this presence was already there, doing its perfect work. She practiced this recognition constantly. Her daughter's condition improved gradually over months, not overnight. The doctors were surprised by her response to treatment. They called it remarkable. Jennifer knew something else was operating. Not because she had convinced God to intervene, but because she had aligned her consciousness with the truth that presence was already there, already functioning, already being the only life her daughter had. These transformation stories share one common thread. None of these people received instant miracles. All of them practiced recognition of presence daily for weeks and months. Joel Goldsmith was absolutely clear about this point. Recognizing the presence of God is not magic. It is a shift in consciousness that must be cultivated consistently before external conditions begin reflecting it. The results came because they stopped living from the consciousness of separation and lack. They stopped empowering the belief that God was absent or withholding. They stopped begging an external deity for favors. Instead, they recognized the truth that the infinite presence was already functioning right where they were, regardless of appearances. If these transformation stories inspire you to explore the power of recognizing divine presence, like this video to help others discover Joel Goldsmith's profound wisdom, subscribe for more consciousness-shifting teachings, and comment which story resonated deepest with your own spiritual journey. Beyond basic recognition, Joel Goldsmith taught a complementary practice he called the listening silence. After recognizing that presence is here, you move into receptive stillness, not thinking, not asking, not even affirming, simply listening inwardly with your entire being. This listening is how you begin experiencing presence, not just recognizing it intellectually. You might sit quietly for 5 to 10 minutes, having first recognized that God's presence is here now. Then you release all words, all thoughts, all techniques. You simply remain alert and receptive, listening for what cannot be heard with physical ears. Most of the time you hear nothing obvious. That is completely normal and expected in the beginning. What you are actually doing is creating space for presence to register in your awareness. Sometimes it comes as a subtle peace. Sometimes as a knowing that everything is all right. Sometimes as guidance that seems to arise from nowhere. Other times, nothing perceivable happens, but you are still being transformed at levels deeper than conscious awareness. Trust the process even when it feels empty. Another powerful technique Joel taught is what he called impersonalization. When a problem appears, whether in your body, your relationships, or your circumstances, you recognize that it has no personal power over you. It is not your problem or their problem. It is simply an impersonal appearance in consciousness that has no reality in the presence of God. This is not denial or positive thinking. This is a recognition that in the realm of divine presence, the problem you are seeing has no existence, no power, no reality. You are not fighting it or trying to change it. You are recognizing its nothingness in the light of what is actually present, which is God alone. This shifts your consciousness from problem-focused to presence-focused. When you practice impersonalization consistently, something remarkable happens over time. The problem loses its grip on your emotions and thoughts. You find yourself less reactive, less fearful, less controlled by conditions. The problem itself often begins changing without your direct effort, because you are no longer feeding it with the energy of belief in its reality or power. Joel Goldsmith also emphasized what he called the principle of one power. Most people live as if there are two powers in the universe, good and evil, God and something else opposing God. This belief creates enormous suffering because you are constantly fighting against what you perceive as evil forces, bad luck, or negative energy attacking you. Goldsmith taught that there is only one power, and that power is God, the divine presence. Everything else is appearance without actual power. Disease has no power. Lack has no power. Evil intentions from others have no power. Not because you are denying they seem real, but because you are recognizing that in truth, only the presence of God has power, and that presence is here now. When you live from this recognition, you stop fighting battles. You stop protecting yourself from imaginary opposing forces. You stop living in fear of what might attack you. Instead, you rest in the recognition that one power is all that exists, and that power is present as your very consciousness. This single shift eliminates the majority of human suffering over weeks and months of practice. The fourth complementary technique is what Joel called living by grace. Grace is not something you earn through good behavior or spiritual practice. Grace is the natural activity of the presence of God, constantly flowing, constantly available, constantly operating. Your only task is recognizing it and allowing it, not trying to make it happen or deserve it. Living by grace means you stop trying to manipulate outcomes through mental effort, willpower, or spiritual techniques used as tools to get what you want. Instead, you recognize that divine presence is already functioning perfectly, already providing what is needed, already organizing circumstances for good. Your job is not doing, but recognizing and allowing. This is perhaps the most challenging shift for most people, because we are so conditioned to believe we must make things happen through personal effort. Joel taught that effort in the external world is fine, but the consciousness behind the effort must be one of recognition, not struggle. You work, but you work from grace, knowing that presence is the actual power accomplishing everything, not your personal self. The most common obstacle people face when practicing recognition of presence is the persistence of doubt. You recognize God is here, but 5 minutes later, fear dominates your thoughts again. You feel like a failure, like the practice is not working, like you are doing something wrong. Joel Goldsmith addressed this directly and compassionately in his teachings. He explained that doubt is completely normal, especially in the beginning weeks and months. Your consciousness has been conditioned for decades to believe in separation, lack, and limitation. These thought patterns do not disappear overnight simply because you intellectually recognize a higher truth. The old consciousness will reassert itself repeatedly. This is not failure. This is the process. The solution is not fighting doubt or feeling guilty about it. The solution is gently returning to recognition every time you notice you have drifted back into fear or separation consciousness. You might need to return 100 times in a single day. That is perfectly fine. Each return is strengthening the new consciousness. Over time, recognition becomes more natural, more automatic, until it becomes your baseline way of experiencing reality. Another significant challenge is waiting for feelings to confirm the practice is working. You recognize presence intellectually, but you do not feel peace, joy, or divine love. You feel nothing special, and this creates discouragement. Joel was very clear about this trap. Presence is not primarily an emotional experience, especially not in the beginning of practice. The recognition of presence is a knowing, not a feeling. You know that presence is here the same way you know the sun exists even when clouds cover it. Your emotions will fluctuate, your feelings will rise and fall, but the truth of presence remains constant regardless. If you make your practice dependent on feeling a certain way, you will quit during the inevitable dry periods. What matters is consistency of recognition, not intensity of feeling. Keep recognizing presence is here, even when you feel nothing. Keep recognizing it is functioning, even when circumstances look terrible. Keep recognizing it is the only power, even when fear screams otherwise. This faithfulness to recognition despite lack of emotional confirmation is what builds the consciousness that eventually transforms everything you experience. The third major obstacle is impatience with results. You practice recognition for 2 weeks and expect your life to completely change. When it does not, frustration sets in. You conclude the teaching does not work or that you are somehow incapable of spiritual realization. Joel encountered this constantly with students and always reminded them that consciousness transformation is gradual. He often compared it to learning a musical instrument. You do not pick up a guitar and play beautifully the first week. You practice scales that sound terrible. You make mistakes constantly. Your fingers hurt. But if you persist through this awkward beginning phase, gradually your skill develops. Eventually, music flows naturally. Spiritual consciousness works exactly the same way. Most people give up right before the breakthrough would have come. They practice inconsistently for a few weeks, see no dramatic results, and abandon the path. Joel taught that consistent daily recognition over months is what builds the consciousness that manifests as changed conditions. Some students saw results in weeks, others in months, some in a year. All who persisted saw transformation. None who quit did. The final obstacle is trying to use recognition of presence as a technique to get what you want. Your true motivation is not recognizing God, but manipulating reality to improve your circumstances. This subtle misuse of the teaching prevents it from working because you are still operating from separation consciousness, still believing you lack something that you are trying to get. Joel taught that recognition of presence must be practiced for its own sake, for truth's sake, not for outcome manipulation. When you recognize presence simply because it is true, regardless of whether it changes anything in your life, then paradoxically, everything begins changing. But when you recognize presence as a tool to fix your problems, you are still affirming the problem's reality and power. The shift happens when you genuinely care more about living in truth than about getting results. When recognizing that God is present becomes more important to you than whether your bank account grows or your health improves. This surrender of manipulation is what allows the natural transformative power of presence to operate freely in your experience. If these insights about overcoming obstacles speak to your current challenges with spiritual practice, like this video to support consciousness-expanding content, subscribe for deeper Joel Goldsmith teachings, and comment which obstacle you are ready to transform right now. Thomas was a corporate lawyer who applied recognition of presence in his high-stress career. He began each workday with 5 minutes of recognizing that divine presence was right there in his office, in his cases, in his difficult clients. He did not ask for success or favorable outcomes. He simply recognized presence as the only power operating in his professional life. At first, nothing seemed different. But within weeks, he noticed subtle changes. He felt less reactive during confrontations. Solutions to complex legal problems appeared in his mind with surprising clarity. Difficult clients seemed to soften when he dealt with them. He was not trying to manipulate these outcomes. They were natural results of his shifted consciousness. After 6 months, his entire career had transformed. He was handling cases with remarkable effectiveness while feeling half the stress he previously experienced. Partners noticed the change and promoted him. But the real transformation was internal. He had discovered that presence could function in the marketplace, in corporate law, in the most worldly situations, not just in meditation or church. Elena was a single mother working 2 jobs, barely surviving financially. She felt she had no time for spiritual practice. When she discovered Joel Goldsmith's teaching on presence, she started with just 30 seconds at a time, between customers at work, in the car, at red lights, before sleeping at night. Brief moments of recognizing presence was here, right in her exhausting circumstances. The financial transformation took 8 months. Not overnight, not dramatic, but steady. An unexpected raise came. One job became unnecessary because the other increased her hours at better pay. Small amounts of money appeared from forgotten sources. Nothing miraculous or magical, but consistent improvement that violated probability. She knew something beyond normal cause and effect was operating. What changed first was not her circumstances, but her consciousness. She stopped living in constant panic and desperation. Even when external conditions were still difficult, something in her remained calm, knowing that presence was there, taking care of what needed to happen. This inner shift preceded the outer shift. This is always Joel Goldsmith's message: consciousness first, conditions second. David was an atheist who came to Joel Goldsmith's teaching accidentally through a friend's recommendation. He did not believe in God, but was desperate enough to try anything for his chronic anxiety and insomnia. Joel's non-religious language about presence as infinite intelligence rather than a personal deity made it accessible to him. He began practicing recognition without religious belief. He simply acknowledged that some infinite intelligence was present, operating his heartbeat, organizing his cells, functioning as his consciousness. He did not pray. He did not worship. He simply recognized this presence of intelligence as a fact, the way he recognized gravity as a fact. This purely practical approach still worked powerfully. Within 3 months, his anxiety had diminished significantly. His sleep normalized. He never became religious in the traditional sense, but he developed absolute certainty that some infinite presence was operating in and as his life. Joel's teaching had worked for him because it was based on recognition of truth, not belief in doctrine. The presence responds to recognition, not religious affiliation. Rachel was a devoted church member who initially felt Joel Goldsmith's teaching contradicted her traditional Christianity. She believed in praying to God for help, asking for miracles, and hoping God would answer her prayers. Joel's message that God does not respond to petitions seemed to deny everything she had believed for 40 years. But her traditional prayers were not working. Her sister's cancer was spreading despite countless prayer requests. In desperation, Rachel tried Joel's approach. She stopped asking God to heal her sister. Instead, she recognized that the presence of God was already fully present in her sister's body, functioning as the only life she had, organizing every cell with divine intelligence. The shift in her own consciousness was immediate. The anxiety and desperation lifted. Her sister's condition stabilized and then slowly improved over many months. Rachel realized Joel's teaching had not contradicted her Christianity, but had deepened it beyond the childish concept of God as a being granting or denying requests. She discovered the mystical Christianity that Jesus actually taught beneath the religious interpretations. When you truly understand what the presence of God is, your entire relationship with spirituality transforms. You stop performing religious activities hoping to please God or earn blessings. You stop living in fear of divine punishment. You stop waiting for heaven after death. You realize heaven is recognizing presence here and now. You begin living from a consciousness of completeness rather than lack. You no longer seek God because you recognize God is not lost. You no longer beg for things because you recognize everything you truly need flows from recognizing presence. Not material things necessarily, but the consciousness that allows life to unfold with grace and sufficiency. This is not positive thinking or self-deception. This is a fundamental shift in how you perceive reality. You move from seeing yourself as a separate person in a world of opposing forces to recognizing yourself as consciousness itself, in which the infinite presence is always functioning. This shift cannot be forced. It unfolds gradually through consistent daily recognition practice over months and years. The practical implications of understanding presence are enormous. When health challenges appear, you do not panic or beg for healing. You recognize that divine presence is functioning as the only life in your body, and you rest in this recognition while taking appropriate human steps. When financial problems arise, you do not despair. You recognize presence as infinite supply, already functioning, and you act practically while maintaining this consciousness. When relationships become difficult, you do not see another person as your problem or your enemy. You recognize that the presence of God is the only identity of every person, including those who seem to oppose you. This recognition dissolves conflicts in ways that argument and defending yourself never could. Not instantly, but gradually and naturally. Joel Goldsmith lived this consciousness until his final breath. He experienced problems like everyone else, but he met them from recognition of presence rather than fear and separation. This is the mystical life he taught, not withdrawing from the world, but living fully in it while maintaining consciousness of the one presence as the only reality and power. You might be wondering what your next step should be. Joel Goldsmith would tell you to start simply. Spend 5 minutes each morning recognizing that the presence of God is here now before you do anything else. Not asking for things, not trying to feel a certain way, just recognizing this truth silently. Let this recognition be the foundation of your day. Throughout the day, pause briefly whenever you remember. In meetings, in traffic, during stress, in joy, simply recognize again that presence is here. These brief moments of recognition gradually build a consciousness that becomes your baseline experience. You are training your awareness to live from truth rather than appearance. Do not expect perfection. You will forget constantly at first. When you remember you forgot, simply return to recognition without guilt or judgment. Each return strengthens the practice. Over weeks and months, you will notice subtle shifts in how you experience life. Problems will affect you less. Solutions will appear more easily. Peace will become more consistent. This is the natural result of living in recognition of presence. Joel Goldsmith's greatest gift to humanity was revealing that God is not far away, not withholding, not judging, but fully present right where you are, functioning as the very consciousness reading these words. This understanding, when genuinely realized and lived, dissolves the root cause of all human suffering, which is the belief in separation from the divine. You now know the practice that transforms everything: recognition of presence. You understand it is not instant magic, but gradual consciousness shift. You have seen how real people applied it in real circumstances with real results over time. You know the obstacles you will face and how to work with them. The path is clear. The only question remaining is whether you will walk it consistently. Your life is about to change, not because of anything you will get or achieve, but because of who you will recognize yourself to truly be. Consciousness itself, in which infinite presence is always functioning, has always been functioning, will always be functioning. This recognition is the secret that Joel Goldsmith spent his life revealing. It is now yours. Use it wisely, practice it faithfully, and watch your entire experience of existence transform from the inside out. If this profound exploration of the presence of God has shifted your spiritual understanding, like this video to help others discover this life-changing truth, subscribe for more transformative Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment, "Presence is here," to affirm your new consciousness and join this awakening community.